We passed a $368 billion climate control facility. We're moving. It is the existential threat to humanity.
So you've already declared that national emergency?
Well, in the practice, you got a bug on it.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. So you've already declared that national emergency?
Practically speaking, yes.
Yeah.
Well, that means no. So the correct answer there is no. No, you haven't. And they throw out big dollar figures, and then you're supposed to say, oh, they fixed the climate of the planet Earth. And it only cost me, my children's future. But at least we saved the planet from us. That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden did a television interview yesterday. He sat down for a television interview with a journalist, Doesn't happen very often. Where was that journalist from, Michael? The Weather Channel. The Weather Channel is the correct. He sat down, another hard-hitting, probing interview. You know how they love probes in Washington, especially ever-expanding probes. They like those the best. Joe Biden sit down with the Weather Channel. So what do you think they talked about? Hey, weather's kooky, isn't it? There they were. They were in Arizona. They were by the Grand Canyon. It's a canyon that is grand. And there's Lunch Bucket Joe wandering around. They had to put up stanchions and velvet ropes so he didn't walk off a cliff into the Grand Canyon and splat like Wile E. Coyote at the bottom. A puff of smoke. And an outline of Joe Biden into the dirt of the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I know it'd be funny. Let's not kid ourselves. That'd be funny. Well, happy Wednesday to you and welcome. That means it's Hump Day, as they call it in the Clinton household, and furthermore, it means that it's Mailbag Day. And I have it's right over here. I have it right in front of me over here. The mailbag questions, and gonna get to mailbag questions because every now and then it's got to be all about me, more about me. But we do have mailbag today, so I will get to that. And Joe Biden, he is not a bright man, is he? Not a smart man, not an honest man, not a truthful man, not a family man, not a professional. And well, he's a professional something or other, but he's not good at what he's been assigned to do right now. That's for sure. And we are at 888-630-9625. That's our telephone number here. It's absolutely toll-free. Don't cost nothing. It's like beer at Delta House. Don't cost nothing. White House, speaking of beer at Delta House, White House cocaine belonged to, quote, a Biden family orbit. It was belonged to somebody in the Biden family orbit. And there is reporting out. You know who's doing the best reporting on this now? Soldier of Fortune magazine. Not the New York Times, not the Washington Post, because they are rented bootlicks. They're not journalists. They don't hold the powerful accountable. That's not what they do. They give tongue baths to Democrats, and they spit acid at anybody that's not a radical anti-American left-wing lunatic. You know, the news media. It's the American news media. Pretty amazing stuff. Oh, speaking of which, Riley Gaines, Riley Gaines, the swimmer that had to swim against that dude, and then the dude won the trophies, and he's sitting at the end of the pool having a sandwich by the time the second swimmer gets in, because the second swimmer is an actual woman, and he's a man. And that's the thing about that Leah Thomas person. Not really his real name, is it? Leah. Hi, my name's Leah. I'm a lady. No, you're not. And no, it's not. But here's your trophy anyway, because Democrats want to make sure. But Riley Gaines, they had an event. It was day before yesterday in Texas. And Governor Greg Abbott down there is trying to secure our border, which is in absolute chaos now. You see the armed lunatic cartel members crossing the border yesterday. Photographs, Fox News, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, none of them are covering it. But photographs of armed men with assault-style rifles. The Democrats should ban them. See how that goes. Of course, the Democrats are the ones that gave them the rifles. Remember Operation Fast and Furious, the Obama-Biden administration funneling arms to Mexico. Hey, what happened to them? Hey, I thought you put the tracking devices on them. and now they're being used to massacre people in Mexico by the cartels, but pay no attention to that. And now we've got these lunatics with AR-15 style rifles and body armor coming across our southern border. sauntering into the country and sashaying across Texas. And what's Biden doing about it? Nothing. That's what. He's doing nothing. He's on their side, not on our side. Also, you see, he's good news for the Mexican drug cartels and the human trafficking cartels and the child sex trafficking cartels. They love Joe Biden. They all love Joe Biden. The Russians love Joe Biden today also because Joe Biden has now taken actions that make Russia more powerful with their control over the world's uranium supply, because Joe Biden, everything he does is good for America's enemies and adversaries, and nothing that he does is good for us. Right? He's great for communist China. He's great for Putin's Russia. He's great for Iran. He's great for the Mexican drug cartels, the child sex trafficking cartels. He's Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. He's not good for us. But there's another great story out today, not only about the White House cocaine belonging to someone in Biden's family orbit, and that's good stuff. A story today also that the amount of money Joe Biden has funneled to Ukraine, because he supports securing Ukraine's borders. He's very, very interested in making sure that Ukraine's borders are safe and secure. And if anybody should try to cross them, well, they should be killed. See? They should be bombed, cluster bombs. He's cluster bomb Joe, cluster bomb Biden. He's funneling cluster bombs to Ukraine to kill Russians if they should cross the border into Ukraine, because he doesn't want anybody crossing Ukraine's border. But the good people at Breitbart put together a story today. They did some math. The Washington Post has not done this. CNN has not and will not do this. But Breitbart figured out, say, wait a minute. If you took the amount of money that Joe Biden has funneled to Ukraine, because Ukraine gave the Biden family millions of dollars, so Biden has given Ukraine tens of billions of American taxpayer dollars to secure their border and to kill anyone that violates their border without prior approval. But it turns out that if you took the money that Joe Biden, our money, has given to Ukraine for war and fuel the military-industrial complex, because he's a military-industrial complex guy, he's the guy that Eisenhower warned us about. At least one of the guys that Eisenhower warned us about. In the famous military-industrial complex, the Beware the Military-Industrial Complex speech, he was talking about Joe Biden. But Breitbart figured out, if you took the same amount of money that Joe Biden has given to Ukraine to wage war and kill people, you could have built the border wall along the U.S.-Mexico border and paid for it in full, no loans, none of that, twice. You could have built, you could have a double wall. And we were only shooting for a single wall. But Joe Biden is an open borders pro-cartel president. And never mind the 107,000 Americans that died from lethal drug overdoses in the course of a single year under Joe Biden. 107,000, a number greater than the total number of Americans that died in the Vietnam War and the Korean War combined. Never mind that. They don't care about that. You don't hear anybody talking about that, do you? The Democrats, the news media, but I repeat myself, they're not talking about that. They could care less about 107,000. In World War I think we lost 114 or 115,000 Americans. Last year, that many to fatal drug overdoses. Open border Joe, cluster bomb Joe, he, never mind that. So we've got that for you today, too. Also, this is just crazy, but and it is nice that Breitbart worked on the story, and not the New York Times. 60 Minutes is not doing this story. Biden's billions for Ukraine could have built a wall 2 times across the U.S.-Mexico border. That's an important story. But our news media is a gang of rented, I don't want to insult prostitutes, because prostitutes, I think, have they've made decisions and probably a lot more dignity on average than the Biden administration and the Democrats writ large. Also, speaking of which, prostitutes and Joe Biden, we got, and cocaine, because, it's a party house. Woo! Why do you think they call it the White House? Biden, the Biden administration, here's from the Times of London, not the Times of New York, but the Times of London, that's in the United Kingdom, which is not even the United States, right? Women in Biden's White House are paid 20% less than the men. That's the story, and they have the numbers and the data, and it turns out that that this is Joe Biden has a long history of doing this, and he couldn't be a bigger hypocrite if he set out to become a bigger hypocrite. Well, maybe somebody'd have to show him the way, though, because he'd just walk into the Grand Canyon and do a Wile E. Coyote splash at the bottom. Yeah, so and he's been paying women less. He paid women less when he was on Capitol Hill. It was reported on when he first became president at the White House. It was reported that he was paying women 20% less. Here's an update on that. He's still paying women 20% less. Is he sniffing them more or less than we haven't actually seen him sniff anybody lately, 'cause he's not around people very much anymore. That might be part of it. Where's Tara Reid? Let's get Tara Reid on the horn, so to speak. That's a figure of speech. And amazing stuff. So the Biden White House, we got updates there. In Washington, D.C., where there have been a lot of murders so far this year, and the year is young, the Democrats have murdered everyone. It turns out that if the media found any Republican murdered anybody in Washington, D.C., that'd be January 6th. That'd be a big, big story. That'd be giant. You know, the Democrats can loot, plunder, burn the city for months on end. And it's starting on Donald Trump's inauguration day, attack people violently, mobs burn cars, loot storefronts. Not a big thing. That they're expressing themselves. First Amendment rights. You know, as Fredo Cuomo famously said, where does it say that protests supposed to be peaceful, right? Well, it says it in the First Amendment, moron. Brother's the governor, father's the governor, sent him to law school. Yeah, where does it say protests supposed to be peaceful? You have the right to peaceably assemble. But never mind that. But if one Republican had killed anybody in Washington, D.C., that'd be front page news for weeks. That's how we know that every murder has been perpetrated by a Democrat. It's kind of a process of elimination thing we've got going there. 161 murders in Washington, D.C. so far this year, up 28% compared to this time last year. We had 16 murders in the first 5 or 6 days of August. 16. First, they were saying 13. Then 3 more died in the hospital a couple of days later because they had been shot by Democrats, just by the way. And then it became 16 dead in not even the first week. It hadn't even reached 1 week of August. And that's it. It's a small city, too. 161 murders so far. On track to have the highest murder rate this year that we've had in 2 decades. And 2 decades ago, we had the highest murder rate in Western civilization. So the Democrats and they're anti-police. And we've got a city councilman who thinks that the European Jewish banking family, the Rothschilds, are responsible for snow and weather. His name is Trayon White. He's a Democrat. He's an anti-Semite. He's a mental dwarf. Can you say dwarf? Because you can't say midget, right? But you can say dwarf. Is that unless you're talking about an old car, an MG midget, can you still talk about those? But there it is. Trayon White is calling for the National Guard. I talked about this a bit yesterday as well, but he's calling for the National Guard to be called out in the streets of Washington, D.C. You may remember Senator Tom Cotton, a combat veteran, wrote a piece in the New York Times in 2020 when the Democrats were burning our cities from coast to coast, looting, attacking police stations and courthouses, burning every police car that Democrats could get their hands on. And Senator Tom Cotton wrote a piece that they made the mistake of publishing in the New York Times because they don't believe in free speech at the New York Times. And Tom Cotton said, send in the troops because of all the Democrat riots, right? And that became such a rhubarb at the New York Times that the editor who allowed the senator to publish a piece suggesting we send troops out to stop the riots that the Democrats were perpetrating from coast to coast because, St. George of Floyd had been killed with fentanyl and what else did he have in his methamphetamine and reefer and, but never mind that. They had to burn the country because they care very deeply about human life when it serves the political interests of the radical left undermining Western values in the United States of America. So Trayon White is calling for the National Guard to be called out. The police union in Washington, D.C. points out that Trayon White voted in favor of defunding the police because he's a moron. And now the murders are everywhere. They had one at the corner of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. What are the odds? Got Malcolm X Avenue and Martin Luther King Boulevard, and the big shooting and murders there, and everybody's like, wait a minute. I guess Chris Rock predicted this about 20 years ago, didn't he? So we got that, and the DA in D.C. We have a DA in D.C. doesn't prosecute any crimes. 67% of crimes brought to his office not prosecuted, and then the murder rate skyrockets, and like, hey, didn't see this coming. I guess they don't listen to this show. We're at 888-630-9625, just scratching the surface. Hey, Trayon, you voted to defund the police. You voted for more murder. You should go to the funerals. You're a maroon. And Riley Gaines and pro-women being spat on, getting spit in their faces, in their eyes, because Democrats showed up to spit on them. And an update on Anheuser-Busch, that Alyssa Heinerscheid, really, she should go down in infamy. Got that one coming up, too. The Transgender Democrat Party, pro-crime, pro-murder, anti-police. And what happens when you put homeless, drug-addicted people in apartments in Washington, D.C.? I'll let you know. Coming right up.
Please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Hey, it's Chris Plant. Excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Book by this July 31st for extra savings. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, wait, we're back. All right, so D.C., we're on track to, get back to the bad old days of Murder Central. Do we have time? Let's go to Keith, calling from Garrisonville, Virginia. Keith, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. How are you?
I couldn't be better, my friend. How about you?
Well, I'm living not in D.C. I guess I'm doing okay. I still have my hide attached to itself. I just wanted to make a quick observation. About a week or so, maybe a hair more, right as the acting, remember this is the word acting as in Hollywood, the acting police chief trying to turn in a performance as a police officer was on the air. Oh no, our murder rate's going up. We're going to have to go to all the resources. I guess that means, hustling the churches, the Ward 8 groups, getting the Kumbaya groups together, maybe even giving Oprah a call, one of our thought leaders. That will bring down the crime rate. All we have to do is watch Oprah and Kamala smile. Well, everything will be well.
They haven't even gotten to that point yet, but I'll tell you what, Keith, I'm going to play some coming up for you. Democrats, not all of them, but so many of them love murdering people. It's terrible, really. It should be frowned upon, I think, but I'm kind of a traditionalist when it comes to not living in a crime-ridden hellhole, although I do live in the District of Columbia, our nation's capital. And yeah, we've got, there's a story out, what happens when you take apartment buildings in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere and fill them with mentally ill, drug-addicted people. I don't know. Probably real hard to predict what'll happen, but I'll explain. Also in Washington, D.C., and listen, let me use Washington, D.C. today as an example, as really a metaphor for the Democrat Party and what they're doing in cities across the United States of America, cities large and small, states, counties. They got the George Soros prosecutors who love criminals more than they care about victims, and they're for the bad guy and not for the good guy. They're the left. So we got that going. Now, Trayon White. You remember Trayon White? He's the guy that made a video of himself driving in his car when it started snowing in Washington, D.C., and he blamed the Jews for the weather. and the Rothschild family, a centuries-old banking family in Europe. And apparently they control the weather and they can make it snow because, the Jews. This is D.C. been elected and reelected. Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, United States of America. Washington, D.C. council member Trayon White.
Man, it just started snowing out of nowhere this morning, man. Y'all better pay attention to this climate control, man. This climate manipulation. And D.C. keep talking about we're a resilient city. And that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters. They can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
He's onto them. He's now his life is in danger because he's onto them, and he said it out loud. They control the weather, and then they're going to take over the cities because nobody wants to take over Washington, D.C. All right? Nobody, except the communist Chinese, and Joe Biden's helping with that. And here's Trayon White. He held a press conference yesterday because he is the councilman for Ward 8, which is south of the Anacostia River, as they say, in Anacostia, where a lot of crime happens. And it is an ethnically rich and culturally diverse part of the city. That's liberal talk for, mostly minority. It's a majority minority. And it has a horrible, terrible crime rate. The rest of the city does too, but it's even worse here. The Democrats are trying to spread it out everywhere and to make people flee the city. The taxpayers and the law-abiding people are trying to make all of us flee, and they're doing a pretty good job. They're doing the same thing in Chicago and in Los Angeles. More people are fleeing Los Angeles, I believe, than any other city in the country right now. I think Chicago is number 2 for people fleeing. Did you see the idiot Democrat governor in Massachusetts, Gesundheit, declaring a state of emergency in Massachusetts because of all of the illegal aliens that have arrived in her border state? Is Massachusetts a border state? Well, it borders other states that border Canada, I think, but that's about it. So here's Trayon White. He's a Democrat. He is an anti-Semite. He is doubtless a virulent racist. And he's anti-police, and he voted to defund the police because the Democrats come up with brilliant ideas, and they came up with another brilliant idea here in Washington, D.C. in 2022, just last year, right? And it was, what did they call it, Michael? It was the Policing and Justice Reform Act. They love that word reform. They apply it all over the place. It's like community. They use the words, but they don't know what they mean. And the Policing and Justice Reform Act got a whole bunch of mostly young black males murdered. Not exclusively. Got a whole lot of people murdered. They made the streets of Washington, D.C. much more dangerous, much more lethal, much more blood-sopped, because that's what Democrats do. I've been paying attention now for decades. You can listen to me and trust me on this. And if you don't believe me, you should look it up. And then you'll say, well, Chris was right again. He tells the truth all the time. How does he do that? How does he tell the truth all the time? So here's the anti-Semite Democrat, Trayon White, from Murder Central in Washington, D.C., yesterday having a press conference where he eventually called for the military to be deployed to the streets of Washington, D.C., to stop the Democrats from shooting everybody.
Just this summer, we have had 12 kids shot in the District of Columbia, and almost a dozen youth and young adults shot in our community as well.
What? And
we're here today standing in solidarity, saying enough is enough.
They're in solidarity. So that's ever since Lech Walesa and the Gdansk, the Dansk shipyard strikes, leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union, a factor in leading to the collapse. Ronald Reagan actually collapsed the Soviet Union, but Lech Walesa helped. I met Lech Walesa and spoke to him at Ronald Reagan's funeral at the Washington National Cathedral, as a matter of fact. So 12 kids just this summer, but just in the past week, 16 shot and killed, at least, maybe more yesterday and last night. I haven't looked at the update yet, but 16 shot and killed in the first week of August, and we're on track for the biggest murder rate in Washington, D.C. in 2 decades. Already had 161 people murdered so far this year in the district, And if any of them had been murdered by a Republican, we would know that. Am I right? Of course I'm right. All right, let's go to back to Trayon, because he thinks maybe the city that he helped as to create as a member of the city council isn't perhaps as nice as it should be.
I know those who live here know that we are clearly in a war zone.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say it again. We are clearly
In a war
in a war zone.
Call and respond.
If you don't know you are in a war zone, that means you haven't been here.
What? So, anybody who lives here know that we're clearly in a war zone, and then the people at the press conference think that it's a call and response situation, so they start parroting what he's saying because Democrats. And then he thinks maybe something should be done about it.
Bad things happen
Bad things.
when good people do nothing. We are standing in solidarity.
That's true.
Say we have to do something.
Solidarity.
Can we say do something?
Do something.
Can we say do something?
Do something. I had to join in there too because I was moved. I was moved by the power of his magnetism. And can we say do something? The problem is not our guns, it's your sons. The problem is no parent households, one parent households. The death of the moral compass in the United States of America, which the Democrats have led the charge on. They don't believe in morality. They believe in child genital mutilation. And they ban guns, which they've done in Chicago and Washington, D.C., and then Chicago and D.C. have the highest murder rates in Western civilization, and they want to ban guns again because maybe the second time it'll work. Every day is an IQ test, and not everyone does well. Trayon White.
So I have spoken with the D.C. National Guard. And while I have to have more conversations with the chief of police, which I have today, and the mayor and my colleagues, we have a long way to get there. We just know that police alone is not getting it done. I saw the shooting video of Nia Courtney, who was shot on Martin Luther King Avenue and Malcolm X. Think about the irony of that. On Martin Luther King, intersecting Malcolm X, we had 5 people shot. One was a little girl. And guess what I saw in that video?
What?
The police sitting right there. There was a shooting. I won't even want to say a shooting. There were 3 shootings this summer at funerals. And one funeral, guess what I saw in the video?
What?
The police sitting right there.
See, the cops are the bad guys. See, the one thing is clear to him. The cops should have got out and shot the people that were shooting people, but then he would lynch the cops because he's a left-wing, dim-witted, radical, anti-police, perfectly mainstream Democrat who is much more responsible for the shootings and the murders in Washington, D.C., obviously, than the police. The police aren't responsible for your children. The problem is not our guns, it's your sons. Stop raising murderers. Stop raising killers. Try having a 2-parent household. I grew up in a 1-parent household. Look at me. Come on, But honestly, that's the moral destruction, the destruction of the nuclear family. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, is an old Democrat Party saying, and it was just one shot in their war on the nuclear family, which they have undermined and opposed for generations now, for decades now. The Democrat Party is anti-family. When you destroy the family, well, you create the school-to-prison pipeline. The statistics are all there. They're readily available if anybody's interested. Pretty amazing stuff. You may recall Mayor Muriel Bowser with Sha Na Na. And back in April, she held a press conference, and she brought up the idea because it had been brought up before, the National Guard. You remember January 6th, they militarized the city of Washington for months because the left is here. Sleeping in parking garages. Yeah, that's right. They had the National Guard sleeping in parking garages, and the Democrats were delivering pizzas with broken glass in right to the National Guard people because the Democrats. And then, day before yesterday, they were spitting in the face of Riley Gaines because she thinks that women's sports should be for women and not men. I don't say biological men because we know that men are biological men. We don't, it would be superfluous to say biological before you say men. But Mayor Muriel Bowser, left-wing Democrat.
If we feel the need to call them in for that type of mission and what's within their mission, given their level of readiness, we would do that.
The National Guard. If that was, you think that was non-committal enough? You think that was if, and then it was within their mission, and then no, you should just continue to defund the police. And I just brought it up the other day as well. My best girl and I, Memorial Day weekend, speaking to police officers, D.C. police officers, friends, and old friends and new friends in the police department. And we were being told by the police, because of what the Democrats have done in this city, the police are not policing aggressively. The police are not policing assertively. The police are not chasing criminals to ground in their cars, the cruisers. Police are not chasing criminals to ground on foot the way that they used to, because they know that the Democrats are waiting to lynch them. And they are the Democrats running the city, elected by the idiot taxpayers. I'm one of them. I didn't vote for these idiots, but I'm one of them nonetheless. And, the Democrats have gutted policing. Just amazing stuff. Yeah, and Trayon, it's the Jews and the Rothschilds are controlling the weather, and this is fine. Again, if this guy were a Republican city council member in Washington, D.C., let's say a straight white male Republican city council member who said that lunatic stuff about the Rothschilds controlling the weather and taking over the city, that person would be crucified on Capitol Hill, and the entire country would excoriate him, scourge him, stone him. Might even spit on him, like the Democrats were spitting on Riley Gaines day before yesterday. The head of the Washington, D.C. Police Union is not a moron. The head of the Washington, D.C. Police Union is a normal person. In fact, I'm wearing my Remember Normal t-shirt today. See that? I got my Remember Normal t-shirt, which you can get at the Chris Plant store. Got on Al Gore's Amazing Internet. It's got a Chris Plant Show logo, very tastefully on the sleeve, but on the chest, Remember Normal, which we're struggling to do as a country and as a culture. Greg Pemberton is the head of the Washington, D.C. Police Union, and he was on the radio yesterday on WMAL with my good pal, Vince Coglianese. He's Italian, you know. It's Italian. And Vince Coglianese. It's Coglianese. Vince Coglianese, and he had the head of the D.C. Police Union, Greg Pemberton, on yesterday to talk about Trayon White and his calls for the National Guard to be put on the streets of Washington, D.C. Because when the left fails, when they destroy law enforcement, then you got to call in the military, because that's how badly they do everything, right? When the Democrats are done with the place, you're going to need a military occupation to put it back on track. The Democrats did this to our nation's capital because they're stupid, they're corrupt, they're filthy, dirty, rotten, anti-police, pro-criminal. They're Democrats. That's sum it up thusly. They're Democrats. That's a two-word summation. Here's Greg Pemberton, the head of the D.C. Police Union.
We are short about 500 police officers right now citywide, and I'm sure that he's feeling that in Ward 8 and the citizens that are there with him are. And it really is correct that it's a war zone. I mean, it's absolute bedlam and mayhem out there when you look at the crime stats. We're at 161 homicides this year, which is a 20% increase over last year's.
Bedlam and mayhem out on the streets of Washington, D.C., but law-abiding citizens can't arm themselves because they don't want to have too many guns on the street. Right? That's their down 500 police officers. We're a city, our land is about 61 square miles. We're down 500 police officers. We're about 650,000 people. We're down 500 police officers. We've had, I don't know how many carjackings per square mile so far this year. Here is a great American, Greg Pemberton, the head of the Washington, D.C. Police Union.
It's through the city council's action in passing the 2022 Policing and Justice Reform Act, which is what drove 1,200 police officers out of the department and has rendered us absolutely incapable of hiring anything to replace those numbers.
They've driven 1,200 police because the Democrats passed a ridiculous anti-police, pro-crime. You know, they know it's their sons that are killing everybody and robbing and looting, and they don't want them arrested and handcuffed and put in jail. They've raised criminals, and, you know, they want to have them at Christmas dinner, which they'll probably miss the day, have it on December 27th or something. But, the 2022 Policing and Justice Reform Act. And now, 1,200 police have fled, down 500 police. Not a huge city. That's pretty amazing stuff. Here's Greg Pemberton.
The problem is that he's the one that broke it, and it's through the city council's action in passing the 2022 Policing and Justice Reform Act, which is what drove 1,200 police officers out of the department and has rendered us absolutely incapable of hiring anything to replace those numbers.
But you heard Trayon White blaming the police because, you know, they're shooting people at the corner of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And the police didn't shoot them down because the police know that then Trayon White and the Democrats will lynch the police. Am I right? Of course I am. We are at 888-630-9625. Oh, we got a lot to talk about today. Joe Biden yesterday at the Grand Canyon did an interview with the Weather Channel, another hard-hitting interview. Announced there will be no oil drilling, no energy independence. We won't allow mining for uranium where the uranium is, which is great news for Putin and Russia. Joe Biden coming up. And let's go to Scott calling from Gainesville, Virginia. Scott, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Doing great, Scott.
I got a quick question. Part of the blame game that the left likes to do is blame everything on the NRA. As we peel back this onion, I think we should go down to Ward 8 and ask two basic questions. Ask them what the NRA stands for, and are you a member?
That's pretty good. That does cut to the chase. And what do you think the results will be?
Does.
What kind of percentages do you think you're going to get on that?
I think it's slim and none on the first question and probably zero on the second question as far as participation.
I think that you are a Nostradamus-like individual.